Is the airline sector going to need a bailout?
I think so. When I was looking, if you look at ULCC, their last high was 5 years ago. JetBlue, their last high was 3 years ago. Um, Southwest, their last high was 3 years ago. United Airlines, last high was in 2019. Delta, last high was in 2019. Some are doing okay or they're stable, but they haven't made new highs in 3 to 5 years. I know there have been attempts at mergers, and I normally don't like those in the airline space, but if the entire sector is doing bad and no money is going to go into them and outflows are from the hedge funds are considerably going out quarter over quarter, like what are they going to do? I think a part of the issue, of course, everyone wants flights for cheaper. Things cost more. Gas prices continue to fluctuate. But I don't think, given the issue that we've had with United Airlines, there's not enough money being poured back into the planes, and the experience is not the best. I've always hated this category to invest in long term, but I'm wondering, do they need a bailout to prevent some of these companies from going out of business? We've seen it in the small banking community. They have a lot of issues right now. And I'm just worried if they don't get a bailout or if some changes are not made, 2 or 3 of these will go out of business in the future. So keep your eye on that. But what do you guys think? Do they need a bailout, or should we just let them go out of business?
Let who go out of business?
Some of these airlines.
Like who?
JetBlue's underperforming. Alaska's underperforming. American Airlines is underperforming. Spirit.
You can't. I mean, you can't let every airline. Then how would you fly?
I agree. Right? No, I'm not saying let all of them. Should we let some, or do they need money pumped into the sector to make the airlines more competitive?
It's tough, man. When you think about, especially people who travel, as you can see, right, the way we're traveling has changed. The amount of space that you're getting on these seats has changed, but the price is limited, right? And the prices.
Yeah, even with the Ghana, I was like, "What plane is this? Soul plane?"
Shout out to Delta. The space has gone down, but the prices have increased. Which, for the average family, you got to take that into account when you're talking about discretionary spending. How much money will you have to even travel? There are a lot of these airlines, but I think one of the things we need to look at is who's making the planes. Right. So when you talk about Alaska, why is Alaska trailing? Well, why are we seeing it decline? Well, that the incident that they had when a door flies off, that doesn't help the stock. But Boeing's making that plane, right? And so when we see Boeing get affected because of this is how it works. It's a trickle-down effect. Who makes the plane?
Yep.
So the first is the company that gets affected, then the maker of the plane gets affected. And so since Boeing has struggled over the past 3 to 4 years and they haven't quite figured it out on the 737, the entire industry has taken.
Going to suffer.
It's going to take a hit, and it has suffered for a bit. And it goes back to one of your golden rules, that not investing in things that have an engine or a motor. And every time I see reports like this, it reminds me of why that's such a good rule if I'm beginning in investing, because some of these things are not in your control, right? How do you control that? Right. When they did the investigation of why the door flew off, they said that, a few of the screws weren't tightened. As a shareholder, these things are not in your control.
Yeah. And quick turnaround time on flight. They barely clean the planes properly. You can't do like a proper inspection if it's flying from LA to New York or LA to Newark. Like, I think, and Boeing has recovered some, but I mean, if we look at 2001, they went up a lot, then came back down in 2008 and 9, crashed in 2020. They haven't got back to those highs. So I think when I'm looking at like American exceptionalism, we'll talk about China later. There's a few industries that need to improve, and we can't put all of our weight in on technology, AI, chip manufacturing, but some of the industrial plays like this and infrastructure have to improve, and the entire sector of airlines is fucked up right now.
Right.
Like if you gave me $1 million to put into airlines, I couldn't tell you one that I would comfortably be able to invest in for a 2 or 3 year period that would give me a great return.
Yeah. Pre-pandemic, Boeing was trading over $400. It peaked at $422 in 2019. It has gotten above 200, but it's been sitting in that consolidation between 180 to around 220 for the past 2 to 3 years. And now it's on a downtrend right now after, some of the incidents that's been happening with the 737. So interesting to watch. But if I had to, Boeing is, when you talk about government contracting and something that's not going to go out of business.
Yeah.
That probably won't go out of business, right? When we're talking about the amount of money that the government can spend and them having contracts with them. But yeah, it's a tough space to dump money in for me personally.
Absolutely.
So
I would stay away from all airlines right now.
What's your theory again for people that just started watching?
Stay away from any company that has an engine as a main product. I know some people are going to say, what about Tesla? Tesla is really a technology play with a little bit of solar masquerading as an automotive company, because if so, they wouldn't have the current valuation that they do have, because it's maybe 9 or 10 automotive companies that are outselling Tesla if you're looking at top line revenue. So if it's a cruise line, airline, automotive company, I won't invest in because the costs are too high and those assets depreciate too fast when they are taken off the lot.
Those assets, y'all. Assets.
Yep.
So,
I mean, if y'all can buy it if you want to for your personal life, but in the stock, leave it alone.
Yeah.
So let's talk about we have a guest that we're going to have a conversation with, but before that, let's talk about the S&P 500 hit all-time high, and it's still running. So the number one question obviously is going to be, is it too late to invest in the S&P 500? And here's a fun fact for you guys, in case you didn't know.
Yeah.
So the S&P 500 is at an all-time high. We know Nvidia just keeps going. NASDAQ, QQQ, the stock market is going up, right? Since 1952, the market has never had a down year when an incumbent president is running for re-election.
What is incumbent?
That's somebody who's already in office, right? So it's never had a down year in almost 72 years. 72 years, the stock market has not had a down year when a president that is in office that's running for re-election is running during an election year.
Yeah. And
obviously Joe Biden is in office and he's running, at least now. He might drop out, who knows, but at least now he's still running. So, it's a couple theories on this, but in layman's terms, the White House has a lot of influence, right? As far as Treasury Department and different things of that nature. Why would you not want the economy to do well when you're up for re-election? So you use all the tools at your disposal to make sure that the economy is running well for the year that you it's like going to a job interview, right? Like, you're going to make sure you get a haircut. You're going to make sure that everything is done correctly to put yourself in the best position possible. And let's not forget Jerome Powell, who is the chair of the Federal Reserve.
Yes.
And if you're not familiar, so for the people that say presidents have no power, that's not actually true. They don't have absolute power, but they have power. So
yeah,
who appoints the chair of the Federal Reserve? Civics question for anybody in the chat. Do you know?
Jeopardy time.
You guys know?
You're gonna educate us all right now.
The president of the United States.
Ding 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 ding.
Yep.
Jerome Powell theoretically could still work even if his boss gets fired, but probably not. I would have
Trump said he's out of there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So he's gonna. So it's just human nature, right? He's gonna do. He wants to keep his job, I assume, right? So he's gonna do his best job possible to make sure the economy is up and up, because it's probably his last days working if Trump gets elected. So there's a trickle down. So now you start to see that there's a domino effect here. It's not just one person loses a job. If Biden goes down, his whole administration goes, especially Trump. He's not keeping anybody. So there's
everybody going.
Yeah. So there's a White House machine that pumps this economy, pumps the stock market during election years to make sure that the president has the best chance of winning. You as an investor should know that. because
It's key.
you should know if the stock market has it. Now, is it 100% guaranteed? No, anything can happen, but it's a high probability that
it
doesn't hurt. Yeah, and I think what Powell has in his favor, even if Biden isn't reelected, which is unfortunate, is that you look at the track record, right? If you look at the market over the past 4 years, the Dow, the S&P went over 5,000 for the first time. NASDAQ was historic, right? The NASDAQ is very close. I'm sure it probably will at some point hit its all-time high. These numbers, the Dow went over 30,000 for the first time during this administration. So the numbers are there. The history shows that they've done a great job, that he's done a good job as a Fed chair, but sometimes good isn't great enough. So yeah, it's tough.
Rock party.
Sometimes good isn't.
You got to be elite. But if we look at it, we only had one bad year while he's been chair. Like 2022 was rough, but if we look at the rise of Nvidia, AMD's resurgence, Meta, that's because of the policy. So it helps to know what the Treasury and Fed chair is going to do, to know the temperament, to allow you to see if they're going to allow the economy to grow. Because there's a bunch of ways he could have played the inflation angle. He could have dropped rates really fast, really aggressively. I think he did a good job of managing that ship in the middle of a storm. Like without that policy, we would not be here today.
He's been pretty adamant about getting it back down to 2%. And I mean, people were expecting going into the year that March would be the first Fed rate cut, but it didn't happen. But look, you still got June, you still got July, you still got all of the summer leading up to the election where you can cut a quarter, 0.5%.
Yeah.
I mean, you got these tools at your discretion. So, I mean, that only helps.
Gotta use it,
right? You start seeing inflation go down, CPI numbers, everything is indicating that this is a positive environment for the market. So, yeah, election years sometimes help.